Hi, this is Jen Mayo. I'm a 7th grade English Language Arts teacher, and with me is Thea Durling, a 7th grade mathematics teacher. Today we're going to be looking at how to use Google Forms as PARCC practice. We'll be looking at how we can replicate question styles and then how to look at the data afterwards.
The objectives for our screencast is to talk about the importance of using Google Forms and model the different ways Jen and I have used Google Forms in our classroom, and then discussing ways to incorporate the use of Google Forms, and then looking specifically at using conditional formatting so that you can use the data well.
So why would you use a Google form for PARCC practice? So first of all, there's some limited resources out there for PARCC materials. We really can use what's given to us through the PARCC website. It's going to provide additional practice opportunities for our students. This is a brand new formatting for a test for our students, so this will give them extra opportunities to practice. Google Forms also replicate most of the question types. There's drop-down menus, multiple choice questions, essay questions, and you can also choose more than one from a list. There's also ways to recreate pages, just like in the PARCC exam where you have a page with 1 or 2 questions on it. Google Forms can also replicate the same page process. Then finally, when you use a Google Form, you're allowed to look at the data for analysis. The PARCC practice tests don't allow you to look at the data. Once a student submits the practice test, all of their answers go out somewhere in the internet void, and this allows you to look at the data collection. No, we're not.
So what we're going to look at now is how to actually create a Google form. And so to do that, you'll go into Google Drive. This is a shared file that Jen and I have. And under New, you'll go to More and put in a Google form. So this will be shared between the two of us. So you have a couple of options here at the top. We require the login to make sure that it stays here within our school. We would like them to automatically collect the username. I like them to have the progress bar on the bottom, and we're only going to allow 1 response per person so that people have to log in. You might want to do shuffle question order. I did that in my first one, and then one of the big mistakes I made was that I didn't have the students put their names in, so when I got the data, it just had this list of their email addresses, and that was really hard to manage. So Jen taught me that one of the things you do is put the name on as one of the questions, and then you don't really want to shuffle the question order in that case.
So the first thing you want to do when you start a new form is to title it. So for example, when we come back from winter break, we're going to be working on child labor in Victorian England, and I'm going to design a PARCC practice test based on that subject matter. So we'll title this one Child Labor in Victorian England. And so this is the title of the form that the students will see, and you will see, and also the spreadsheet where all their responses are going to be collected will also be titled Child Labor in Victorian England Responses.
As you think about using the PARCC, especially if you're creating your own sort of PARCC style in Google, one of the things that you have to do is think about which style of question you want. So when you are writing a question, say that I want one where the kids are going to put some numbers in order. I might do that as a multiple choice question. So I can put here, put the following values in order from least to greatest. And then when I do multiple choice, they'll give me the ability to put in 4 different options. I make most of my questions required questions unless it's a challenge problem, and that means the kids can't submit the form unless they've put an answer in. You can put help text in here as well. One of the things, certainly from a math perspective, is that different kinds of questions lend themselves to different questions in the math. So a text question would be just filling in the answer. Checkboxes would allow them, is this the choose more than one?
Yes.
Checkboxes is choose more than one, so that's sort of a new style of question we never saw in the MCAS where you could pick more than one option. There's also choose from a list. And then we've been experimenting a little bit with scale, which is when you can go from 0 to 5, and then also a grid. As you create questions, Google is automatically creating a spreadsheet. So we have a spreadsheet here that's currently empty, but it will reflect every question that you have, and that will then show up as data that you collect. When you're creating a form, you can also view the live form, and this lets you look at what it looks like right now for the students.
So after you write a question or two, so in a lot of my English ones, I'll have 2 questions per page, one of them asking, what is the meaning of this word, or what do you think the author's purpose was, and then a second question that asks what their evidence is, and I list some text from some excerpts from the text as their answers. After you do that and you want to create a page to replicate that PARCC style test, you're going to go to add item and you can hit page break, and that's going to create a new page for them. And that's where the progress bar comes in handy, because the students can see at the bottom of the page how many more pages they have left to go.
That's something that I know Jen has used and I'm only starting to use, but one of the things we found on the PARCC when the kids started doing PARCC practice is the idea of having to go up to the left-hand corner and hit the arrow button to move forward was definitely new to them. And so I think Jen's idea about doing the different pages helps replicate that experience and sort of train the kids that, oh yeah, I need to pay attention to what's coming next.
All right, and if you have any further questions of creating a Google form, feel free to contact us. But you can also talk to your tech integration specialist in your building, and they'd be happy to help you create your Google form. So the next thing we're going to look at is a couple of things just to keep in mind when you're creating the forms, is that Google Forms actually don't save like a Google Doc, Google Docs, Google Presentations, things like that. Save as you go, and your actual form as a teacher when you're creating it is going to save as you go. But once the students get into this live form version, it's not going to save their work. So they have to fill it all at once and submit their answers for their answers to be submitted. If they click out before hitting submit, their work will be lost. So just keep that in mind and make sure your students remember that as they go on. I know Thea and I both have created Google Forms that we wanted to share with others on our team. So there is a way to send the form. I'm going to have Thea talk more about this because she does it a lot with her math team.
So for example, this is a review for the ratios and proportions unit test that I just gave. And so when I went to get the link for the students, there was also the option of adding what are called collaborators. So I was able to add Kirsten Kramer and Irene Witt, who are my colleagues in the 7th grade math team. And this allows them to get a copy of it, not as a student, but as a teacher, and then they can use it for their students. And so that's a nice option where you can create something and then share it without having to have other people create things.
So, and this was great for English, because what I did was I took the practice PARCC exam for the 7th grade and I recreated the entire test on a Google form, and this took a lot of time because the PARCC practice test, the test nav, does not let you do keyboard shortcuts to copy and paste, so I would have to highlight and then go up to edit and hit copy and then paste it into the form. So I was able to take this whole thing and recreate it in a Google form, and then I shared it with my colleagues so that they wouldn't have to go through the same process as that I did. And you can see here I have their name, what block they're from, and then the 2 multiple choice questions, and then they hit continue once they finish, and here's what the progress bar looks like.
One of the things I liked when Jen showed me this was that she had copied down here the text out of the PARCC. So when you look here, this is that sort of subcategory where she had actually copied word for word the instructions out of the PARCC as well.
All right, so a few things to keep in mind when you're working through creating a form for ELA is that the PARCC on the practice gives you the text on one side and the questions on the other, and it's very difficult to recreate this in Google Drive. You'd have to like keep copying and pasting the text into the form, and it would just make it look really clunky. So what I did was that I copied the text and I printed them out for students to use while they were working through the test. You can load videos into the form, but just make sure that you load it into each page where the video is being used. And then there's just a few features and question types that cannot be replicated, like highlighting sentences and using the drag and drop feature of the test can't be recreated in Google form.
And there are some issues in math as well. One of the biggest things is we haven't really found a good way to replicate equation editor. So if you look at some of what we have here in forms, you can end up with some clunky things where you might have like fractions written, these are proportions, and they're written in a single line rather in the format that I would prefer, which would be like the fractions with the numerator over the denominator more clearly. So that's something that as of right now, I don't think we have the option for in Google Docs or Google Forms or at this time. I suspect that it'll show up as we begin to do more work with them. And then there are some tools and question formats that aren't available yet, and there are a lot that are. I think it's great that we have drop downs and we have pick more than one and pick one answer, and I think that there are a lot of really good features in here. But there are things like, for example, in the 8th grade where you're snapping points on a coordinate grid, and we just don't have the means to do that right now.
So once your students submit their answers, they're going to show up in the form, in the spreadsheet for responses, and it can be quite overwhelming to look at this and think, okay, what am I going to do with all this data? And one thing that I found to be helpful is to use conditional formatting to show which questions are correct and which ones are not. So you can see that I've started to conditional format this spreadsheet, and all you have to do is you click the column. So I know the correct answer for this one was B, an instance of something happening again. And what I did was I clicked this little arrow here in the column and I went down to conditional formatting. And because it's a multiple choice question, the only thing that's going to show up, it has to be text is exactly an instance of something happening again. And then I chose that the background color would be green. Now, if it's not a multiple choice question and it's something that they're typing in or that might not be exact, I wouldn't use text is exactly. I would use text contains, and I think this comes up more in math with simplifying and in decimals versus fractions. And then for any essay questions, I wouldn't use the conditional formatting. I would just go in and grade it with the rubric that I was using. So the conditional formatting helps you look at it quickly and say, okay, this was correct, this was not correct. And I think Thea has to speak a little bit more to math in the conditional formatting.
So when I did this, this was that unit test review that we've spoken about before, and I did the conditional formatting. Anything in green is right, anything in white is either not correct or the computer isn't recognizing it. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to look for patterns in the data and talk to the kids quickly about what they might be doing. So it's a very efficient way to take care of that. It can have some limitations in math. You need to just look at it carefully. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. We're really interested in how to incorporate PARCC Practice into our regular daily work so that it's not an additional thing. It's something that the students are doing. My students were going to review anyway, so now they're reviewing for their test and they're reviewing for the PARCC at the same time.
Yeah, it's not an extra thing. It's just something you can build into your curriculum already. And again, email us if you have questions, and also speak to your tech integration specialist if you have any further questions about creating a Google form or the conditional formatting. Thank you.